So hello everyone, back to the main stage of this event. And now it's a pleasure to introduce my fellow board member, Ray. He has worked in the field of credit risk analytics for around 25 years, and he has written two very nice books, The Credit Scoring Toolkit and The Credit Intelligence and Modeling from 2022. He's a Canadian, but as you see in the background, he is a resident of South Africa. And he worked with the Standard Bank of South Africa for, I guess, more than 30 years. And before becoming a short-term consultant for the International Finance Corporation. Today, Ray is going to talk about geopolitical risk. And I think we will have some very interesting insights to this topic. So, Ray, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Cheers, Peter. Okay, so I don't know if it's going to show up my picture here shortly, but in any event, I'm going to sort of carry on with the speaking. So are you able to see my screen? I'm going to sort of share. I'm not seeing my own picture here.
So at the moment, we just see your um, the you and what
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. As long as you can sort of see me. Because I can't see myself, so I don't know what's being shown. But in any event, yeah, okay, now I can sort of see it. The that behind me, most people won't recognize that it is actually Table Mountain, but it's from the side of Table Mountain where I live. It's kind of, the poor side of Table Mountain, long ways away from sort of most of the people listening into this conference. And in any event, it has been my home for a long time. But in any event, I am going to sort of carry on here and give you the presentation on geopolitical risk. And I try to avoid, a lot of politics in here. We can save that until after the 10 minutes. Hope I don't say anything that's going to cause me to be struck down by a cruise missile. But we shall see. In any event, this is about geopolitical risk and its implications for model risk. And models are, at their core, structured theories built on assumptions. And shifting geopolitics can invalidate assumptions that we feel are almost sacred. The models don't explode. They don't even throw up error messages, unfortunately. They continue to produce very precise numbers, if only they had the courtesy to panic when we should. This is a short conversation about regime shifts, assumption failure, and the danger of false precision. And I need to sort of do the whole share my screen, which I should have done before. Okay, that's working, I think. Just see one more change here. I'm going to leave it as that, so I'm not sort of messing about. Okay, for this discussion, geopolitical risk means any regime change that affects more than one economy. Stated differently, it is state-driven or sovereign-led changes that alter economic, legal, or trade conditions across borders. Note here that it is not foreign risk. It's not exotic risk. It is sometimes what happens at home. Domestic policy with a passport. The defining feature is the spillover across systems, not geography. And the greater the hegemon, the greater the spillover. And it can boomerang. There are a variety of channels through which geopolitical risk arrives. At the highest level, these can be grouped as state and civil conflict and escalation, sanctions and other economic coercion, policy and regime shifts, and the fragmentation of global systems. I haven't ordered them by likelihood, but by systemic shock potential, and conflict comes out on top. They are unlikely to happen all at once, even if history has occasionally tested that theory. But any one of them can reverberate across economic borders quickly, quicker than the metrics will tell you. But when it happens, our model assumptions are the first casualty. Those were the structural mechanisms, many of which are playing out in our current environment. Some of the clusters are military conflict, which outside of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, most are occurring in regions where models play no role. Economic decoupling, energy volatility, trade fragmentation, fiscal stress, especially in the USA, but also other advanced economies. A local recent news report said about the mountain of global debt that is a potential problem. Structural showdowns in the largest economies, that one being China, and the latest and greatest boogeyman, artificial intelligence, for now. The point is not which of these is most likely. The point is that each of them has the capacity to change cross-border economic conditions quickly. And that is where model risk begins. I'm going to present 3 practical insights on the following slides. First, the equations are fixed. The assumptions are fallible. Second, risks arise from model use, not the design. And third, geopolitical risk is systemic with a capital S. And I'll elaborate on each of these. Assumptions break, not equations. Models are trained on historical stability under a particular regime. The problem is that many of the most important assumptions are implicit. They are not formally encoded, not explicitly stress tested. Issues can arise from market access, currency convertibility, trade frictions, and we assume that policy responses will be incremental until they aren't. Those are not parameters in the model. They are background conditions. Geopolitical regime shifts invalidate those background conditions. And this is the important asymmetry. The break is abrupt. The metrics lag. The model looks fine until it doesn't. Right, I've got too many buttons here. When geopolitical stress hits, the model may not look broken. Validation may still pass, backtesting may still look reasonable, discrimination may even show temporary improvement. That is deeply comforting right up until it isn't. And I'm repeating that phrase. It's just, that's the way it is. Underneath that reassurance, 3 things may be happening. The cost of being wrong increases. Extreme outcomes become more likely. Relationships that look stable shift abruptly. At that point, the issue is no longer model design. The issue is model use. A model can be technically correct, but decision unsafe under regime change. Most MRM frameworks are model-centric. We validate model by model. We document model by model. We monitor model by model. But geopolitical risk is systemic. Models often share the same macro assumptions. They share exposure to trade, energy, and foreign exchange. When regimes shift, they can fail in correlated ways. Here's the blind spot. Inventories track models, not shared assumptions. Validation reports assess per model soundness. Cross-model fragility is rarely escalated. So the real exposure is not just model risk, it's portfolio level assumption risk. And geopolitical shocks are very good at exposing it. That's where false precision becomes dangerous. Outputs remain precise, automation continues, governance lags. Escalation waits for metrics. Nothing looks dramatic, which is precisely what makes it dangerous. There are no flashing lights. The model keeps producing numbers. But under regime change, the environment may no longer honor them. That is the risk. No broken equations, no failed validation, precision in a structurally shifted world. Let me end where this really matters. Good model risk management under geopolitical stress is not about better prediction. It is not about forecasting wars. It is not about anticipating sanctions. It is not about building ever more complex models. It is about controlled use under regime uncertainty. When the sea becomes unpredictable, the question is not, was the compass well built? The question is, how careful must we navigate? Under regime uncertainty, governance must tighten, assumptions must be surfaced, automation must be questioned. The issue is not whether the model is mathematically correct. The issue is whether its use remains appropriate for now. That's the end of the presentation. Sort of and with that, the intention was to go on to discussion. So this is going to be one of the shorter presentations. And I don't know if it is possible to open this up for broader discussion or if it should be handled through questions in the chat box.
Or maybe we could use the chat for this. So thank you, Ray, for this introduction to the geopolitical risk arena. And maybe I will start with my impression. So you very rightly pointed out that maybe we are some or heavily dependent on precision, and this is maybe not the very best thing to do within this geopolitical risk area. Somehow it reminds me, or it induces some statement like maybe geopolitical risk is just all about tail risk when you want to use this tech slang. Ray, do you think that there is any geopolitical risk outside of tail risk considerations? So is geopolitical risk all about tail?
Well, listen, okay. One of the things is about the tariffs, and a lot of the tariff stuff is not, I wouldn't consider it as tail risk. It's just a sort of at the moment with Agent Orange, it has become extreme. So because of one administration, you seem to be hitting a tail risk. But sort of so many of the movements sort of amongst and between countries, sort of like the shifting relationships, I don't think that is necessarily a tail risk, but whether or not it's can be modeled is another question, just because of a sparsity of data.
So when you say that these models seem to be invalidated time after time, do you think it makes in these areas at all sense to use models or try to
no, listen, one might not be able to sort of use them, use models to try to address geopolitical risk. The problem is dealing with the black swans and knowing when one has to sort of apply a lot more judgment about the use of models, and that was kind of the point of the presentation. The models are tools, but the tools, they are theories, and the theories are basically sort of assumptions, but sometimes the assumptions break. And when the assumptions break, the tools become invalidated. So, at what point do you start saying, hang on, I have to start kind of putting a harness on the horse and sort of say, please, hold back. Like during COVID, one had this sort of situation with COVID where a lot of people realized because of the severity of the event that they stopped using the models or they were just a lot more conservative in their application. And with things like in particular war, I looked at something a while back, which was the impacts of various shocks upon credit ratings, but it wasn't necessarily credit rating. It was Standard and Poor's assessment of various shocks over the ages on sort of companies where it kind of had an effect. And during the sort of First and Second World Wars, and I think even the American Civil War, they had it down where it was affected even the most sound companies. Not that there were that many during the Civil War, but uh, when you have sort of some of these things with geopolitics, what it's saying is that the structures break.
Mhm.
And what you used to think was would never change changes.
Mhm. And what would be, from your perspective, the I'm hesitating to say this, but what would be the hedge for political risk? Ride
So
on
I
as
mean,
many horses as possible, or what would be?
so listen, to my mind, it's basically sort of knowing when to shut the stable door, no, having processes in place to sort of say something has happened. We need to sort of question the use of our model. Which ones would be the most likely to be affected? And okay, you said at the start, I'm Canadian. Sort of how have Canadians sort of been affected by the tariffs and the terminology? I mean, like this is actually one of those where, I said these things can boomerang. Sort of Trump's tariffs have actually boomeranged against the people of Montana because my family doesn't go down there anymore, or they go down and they don't spend money. But it's the one thing to sort of say, have an eye on what's going on around you and have an eye on which models, which assumptions are going to be affected
Mhm.
by the sort of geopolitical event and those assumptions, which models do they underlie? So it's kind of saying, I don't know if this isn't even possible, probably, but if the models are based upon assumptions and you have a register of models, then can you have a register of assumptions and then you kind of link the models to the assumptions that they are based on. But that would be a complex task. In the age of AI, can one sort of throw that out and sort of say, we have these types of models, sort of like what are their assumptions, and sort of like, can I create a catalog of these assumptions
Mhm. And
and
that's
what's going on in the world that might affect
uh-huh.
it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Since a lot of talk in this event so far had been on the topic of AI, somebody may say that yeah, it's just the way how you prompt your LLM in order to get the most robust strategy. Um, but you say rightfully that a lot of problems arise when your assumptions break. And isn't the assumption in ML and AI just that your data is somehow representative? Or is AI possessing some sort of component that transcends this boundary of being
No,
just dependent on the data?
sorry. I think we get so tied up with data. I think, it's the data is just a manifestation of the environment. So it's the environment that's changing. It's those assumptions that are changing that are affecting the data which feed the models.
Mhm. Yeah.
So Jonathan, you should just posted a link. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got enough time to sort of look at that link. Geopolitical risk hedging or timing, evidence from hedge fund strategies. Okay, we'll take the time to read that. I'm going to copy it and paste it so I can take a look at it later. Otherwise, might lose it. Anyways, so I think perhaps what also needs to do is sort of take a look at what is happening, like, for in a country like the Ukraine, because Joe was talking about trying to have somebody from the Ukraine to present on this topic or take part in this discussion along with us. And you know, it would be interesting to sort of know about their experiences, sort of from how they have been affected and how they have had to adapt in this context. At the same time, sort of, it would be something to even just take a look at somebody from Canada and say to them, how has the fluctuations in terms of tariff pronouncements sort of impact, well, and the actual tariff levels impacted upon them. There's perhaps sort of the rumblings of war. I don't think Iran, one wouldn't have any sort of contact to, but Mexico, sort of close by, they are also being affected, similar to Canada, with Mexico is being affected by not just by the American tariffs, but they were also being heavily affected by the sort of streams of migrants that were passing through, many of which were accommodated within Mexico that didn't go across into the USA. So there are perhaps lessons to be learned from from other countries. Sort of where I am in South Africa, we're not as badly affected as a lot of other countries. Although the one thing I was thinking about, and this is one that's a bit political, so we had state capture when we had Jacob Zuma as president. We used to joke about how similar Jacob Zuma and Donald Trump were, but at the time when we didn't expect Donald Trump to see a second term. And the USA is now going through state capture. The extent of that state capture within the USA is having a reverberation sort of across neighboring countries. Well, any potential trade partners. So, like in this particular instance within the USA, when I said that it's not always foreign risk, it's not something that comes from inside. The situation within the USA is where it is geopolitical risk that is resulting from domestic policies that are reverberating back upon it.
So, if there are any questions in the audience, I see Jonathan your post. We'll have a look at this. But if there are other questions, please come forward. We have a few minutes left. And while we may see one or two contributions from the auditorium, maybe one last thought. Since I come from the area of market risk, which is heavily relying on numbers, and where some of these analysis techniques may have one or two successful parts of the story. Do you think that geopolitical risk is less about numbers, but more about stories?
I would go along with that. Yeah, it is more about. I would say that it is more about stories, and the stories about what happens when things don't go according to plan. What happens. I always like the sort of story from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for those that know it, where this species goes to war receives a message, and they go to war because they felt as though they were insulted, and they spend years and years and years trying to sort of find these people that expressed this insult, and they ended up going into another dimension and then were swallowed by a small dog. Sometimes things just sort of this is not the universe as we used to know it.
And there's another question now. adding another dimension on our discussion of the impact of AI on potential global instability. I mean, we're not, of course, not discussing here topics from science fiction or Terminator stories also like this, but maybe there's some sort of point that
Well, listen, I think sort of the potential impact there, and I am speculating here. I think somebody else has probably given more thought to this than I have, because it wasn't necessarily my focus on it. But the one thing is unemployment, sort of, but that's not really geopolitical risk. I think where the AI might be playing into it in the geopolitical context is in terms of state bad actors using AI in the kind of the intelligence sphere and also in the disruption in domestic politics in other countries,
Mhm,
which there's already been, I'd say, use of it in American and other elections. I think we've even had it here in South Africa. And but like sort of stuff to and the it's not really even a model risk per se, but the use of deep fake images to sway public opinion.
mhm, mhm,
But there it's saying who is doing it. So like, is it state actors?
mhm, mhm.
Or is
Yeah.
it sort of domestic actors that are playing? It's it's scary, and yet at some stage I think people are going to learn to doubt.
Mhm. So I
There's
remember
going to have to.
last year's event where we had a colleague who showed us the impact of fake videos or fake contributions, which sounded quite real. And this may be also in the same direction. And I have one last question, maybe um, from Oga, who asks if geopolitical risk should be modeled or managed through other mechanisms. I mean, we briefly touched upon this, I guess, but
Yeah,
Ray, do we have
I don't.
some final word on?
I think it is going to be fully dependent upon the frequency with which it occurs. And my own personal view is that it's you've got to come up with sort of other measures and always be aware of how the environment is changing, because the data, it takes time for the data to reflect the stuff, and because it takes time for the data to reflect the stuff, it takes time for the models to reflect it, especially when the models are only being updated sort of once every couple, 3, 4 years or something or other.
I think this is a very important insight, which also resonates with all this discussion around training data and what these kind of approaches can achieve. So
No,
I
well,
think
so
we have run.
the one thing with the training data is that it depends upon, if you are dealing with a lot of the like microfinance lending where it's the equivalent to payday loans, you don't need a lot of training data. It doesn't go back for that long. If you're dealing with home loans, you need stuff that goes back several years.
Mhm,
Whereas with microloans, it might be several months, and you update the models
mhm,
frequently, and you can sort of rely upon the more upon the AI and machine learning models in order to refresh them. But you can't do the same thing with home loans and the other stuff, which is more regulated.